All right, welcome everyone. See everyone coming in to the Zoom room. Feel free to, of course, unmute or turn your video on if you want. It's always great to be able to see who is in the session. Just checking out all these names. I think I see a few familiar ones, perhaps. Amazing. Yes, amazing. So great to see everyone. Feel free again, come on in. If you want to turn your video on, you're more than welcome to. That's always appreciated. Nice to be able to see folks in the room if you're comfortable with that or in a spot where you can do that. Adam's also dropped the mural link into the chat, which you'll notice. You can feel free to poke around in there. If you happen to be brand new to mural, then it's like a big old whiteboard. And Adam will elaborate on that. But if you go in there and you're confused, then do not fret. We will cover it. Nice. All right. So it looks like some folks are still on their way in. Just using the reaction button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. How many people have attended some other sort of session today or yesterday as part of CRW? Just curious how many folks have been in other sessions so far. Okay, I see a couple reactions there. I imagine there might be more. I know some folks are still joining on in here, so that's great. We just passed the 40 mark for our session. That's incredible. It's so nice to do big group sessions, especially on this topic, the stuff we'll be talking about. It's pretty incredible. All right. Yeah, so again, we're just getting started here, giving it that minute or two to get warmed up. But before we dive in officially, I always like to do, if anyone was in my session yesterday, you'll remember this. I like to do a one-word check-in. It's just a way to kind of see where the group is at, get a sense of how everyone's doing. And oh, I see Taylor said been to one session today. That's amazing. Nice work. But yeah, so one word check-in. What you're going to do is just try to summarize in one word how you're doing right now, what your vibe is, where you're at. It may be easier said than done, but just curious as to where folks are at. So just drop that into the Zoom chat if you don't mind. What's one word to summarize where you are at right now and how you're feeling? Radical. Good one. Very, very appropriate. Yeah, I love it. So yeah, take a minute to take a couple seconds and think of that word. What is one word to describe how you're feeling right now? Drop it into the Zoom chat. This is also helps us get going in terms of the collaborative, interactive nature of some of the topics we'll be talking about. Yeah. Oh, hungry. I'm going to second that. I should have eaten more lunch today, I think. Okay, a little bit of everything. I love it. Thanks for adding those in. Again, if you're just joining in, if you're just entering the room, we're just doing a one-word check-in. So in the chat on Zoom, I'm asking folks to try to summarize what your vibe is, how you're feeling right now into one word and drop that into the chat. And I see a little bit of everything. And that's, you know what, that is almost always the case. You know, there's 50 of us here now in the room. And so everyone's at different spots in their day, in their week, in their semester, perhaps. But yeah, everything from hungry to overwhelmed to excited to what else we got here? Positive. That's all. Bored. Yeah, fair enough. Hopefully that'll change, but we will see. And again, I want to invite everyone to anyone that's in a spot and able to do so. Please feel free to turn on your cameras. It's always really great to be able to see at least some folks and interact in that way when we're doing these sessions. If you're in a spot to do that, highly encouraged. And another thing just to note on that, any point during this session, if you want to unmute and interrupt me, if you want to drop something in the chat, that's also super encouraged. Okay, so it looks like, I feel like most folks have entered in and we're kind of stabilizing around that 50 number, which is incredible. So yeah, thanks for that input in the chat, everyone. I guess we'll get rolling here. My name is Ross McIntyre. I'm faculty at Georgian College, and I also work with the Center for Change Making and Social Innovation, running a lot of different sessions and doing work with some of the other aspects of the center as well. And I'll be facilitating our topic today. We're talking about how do we define a problem? But specifically, how do we do that as part of the human-centered design thinking process? If none of that made sense right now, that's okay. Hopefully it'll be a little bit clearer an hour from now. I'm going to give Adam a minute here to introduce himself as well and jump right in.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Adam, and I am the community animator for the Center for Change Making and Social Innovation. Yes, that is a real job title, and that is a real place. Today, I am the co-host, the co-pilot for the amazing Ross McIntyre today. Can we do a virtual high five? Are you over there, Ross? Yeah.
Oh,
No,
oh,
you
there
got
you
it. You
go.
had it right. On my
Okay,
screen, that
gotcha.
worked. We'll
Okay,
just roll with
gotcha.
that. We've been practicing for the last 40 minutes on this.
Yeah, it's been busy. Lots of
Yeah,
practice.
exactly. So we are recording today's session as well. So I just hit the record button. So if you're not comfortable having your camera on, that looks like a lot of people aren't. So that is okay. And today we will be running the session with a combination of Mural and Zoom. So again, Mural is this whiteboard platform that we talk about. A lot of you probably have some experience in. So I pasted the link into the chat. Get into the Mural space and just maybe minimize your Zoom so you can hear Ross speak. But we're going to be hanging out in the Mural space and participating that way. So I'm here to help. If you have any questions or any problems, just direct message me. I'll be monitoring the chat. Other than that, I'm going to turn my mic off and let Ross fly the ship here.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Adam. And like you said, just to reiterate, any tech problems, or you just want to jump in with a question, we'll have an eye on that chat too. So don't ever hesitate to use that. And so I want to start off too with a land acknowledgement. I want to, I think, begin with the standard land acknowledgement from Georgian College. However, I want to add a little bit beyond that as well. So Georgian College as a whole acknowledges that all the campuses are situated on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people. The Anishinaabe include Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. Georgian College is dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nation Métis and Inuit people. That is certainly the official land acknowledgement. However, as we're learning and growing in this space in terms of what land acknowledgements are, it's important that on our own individual levels, we put time, work, and effort into learning more beyond that, and to personalize it in a way that isn't co-opting the significance of it, but however is acknowledging that we are all, in many respects, on land, part of land that has a long, rich history of different communities, different peoples, that is unceded, right? That is, and so myself personally, as a settler on unceded territory, I always like to think of the significance of this specific area. I'm located in Aurelia, and if you'll notice, I'm going to drop a link in the chat for folks to check out. But in my area, it's actually converges a number of different tribal lands, traditional lands, and it's because this is such a significant area to the to Indigenous communities. The fish weirs were built at a spot called the Narrows, where Lake Couchiching and Lake Simcoe meet, and this is a spot where thousands of Indigenous families for decades and decades would come to build up their fish supplies for the remainder of the year. This site predates the pyramids in Egypt. It's how old it is and how significant it is, but there you wouldn't necessarily know it. Driving by it, you wouldn't necessarily know it. And so these little pieces of history that aren't Canada's history, but are, however, the history of the land, are so important for us to be able to bring into our worlds, to bring into our lives. And so this is something that I just want to acknowledge, that's somewhere that I personally am, and I encourage folks to check out that website and do a bit of that work towards decolonization, because the long-lasting impacts of that are still being felt and seen today throughout Indigenous communities. So thank you for that piece. It's very important, and I'm really glad that we all have the chance to think on that for a minute before we go into our session. All right, so today we're talking about the topic of defining, and we're talking about that in the context of human-centered design thinking. I know some folks may have been in my session yesterday. If just curious, using the reactions in Zoom, I'm hoping to get a bit, or you can put it in the chat like a yes or a no. Was anyone here yesterday for the empathy session that we did based on the human-centered design thinking? So it could be, again, a reaction on Zoom, any type of reaction, or a yes in the chat. Okay, a couple people saying yes. Okay. Or if you were not, I think there's an option for a red X too in the reactions. Okay, that is very helpful, very good for me to know. Amazing, thanks for that. And so what we can do is the link that Adam posted into the chat is going to take us to the mural. It looks like a lot of folks are already in there. There it is again from Adam. And what we're going to do is just go in here. I know it looks like some folks have already done the little step one welcome and check in, but I'll use the old summon feature here. And you're just going to zoom in here and drop somewhere on this scale where you're at in this very moment. How would you rate your mood on this scale? So good way up at the top by 100, bad way down at the bottom. And remember, in Mural you can double click anywhere and add a post-it note, and then you can click on that post-it note and write wherever you want. So it looks like right now anyway, folks are in kind of that top range. And actually, you know what? If for some reason you're not in the mural, you're not able to access it, maybe you're on a phone, that sort of thing, then let's drop that same scale. Let's drop that into the chat. So 1 being on a scale from 1 to 100, 100 being absolutely fantastic, the greatest. What is your current mood right now? 1 to 100. I'm going to put mine in the Zoom chat as well as in the mural. I'm going to say I'm a solid 88 right now. Nice. Okay, I see some other folks in there. Adam, do you see the true number of folks that are in the mural? Are you able to see that? I don't think I have it there. Anyway, that's okay. Awesome. Okay.
36 people are in there.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I don't know why I'm missing that on my end, but that's okay. So perfect. And let's see, pop back here to the chat. Nice, a couple other. So we've got some good. If those were grades, they'd be pretty good grades in our classes, but they're not. Thank you for checking in, doing that piece. So I want to take a minute here as you're still working on that. That's totally fine. But I want to just take a minute here to situate our topic today into the human-centered design thinking process. So I'm going to just do the old summing. So you're able to see what I'm looking at now, the Stanford School Design thinking process. There are 5 key pieces to this. And yesterday, if you're in the session, we did a session on empathize. And that's how we're starting with our problem solving. We're starting from a place of empathy. And that means really diving into to not judge, to just look for understanding, to find a way that we can connect with and be connected to a particular problem. As we talked about yesterday, but just as a catch up for anyone that may not have been there, the problems can exist on any level. What I mean by that is that can happen on an individual level, it can happen on a community level, and it can also happen on a big global level, right? So depending on the particular problem or issue or thing that we're trying to solve, we can view it through those different lenses. So today we're talking about defining it. What does that mean to define a problem? It's not just as simple as Googling it quickly or looking something up to say, okay, that's my answer. We're talking about doing a deep dive into defining a problem, all the different aspects, all the different possibilities. How can we pull this out in a way that gives us the biggest and best picture of the problem we're solving? And just like the empathy stage, we can do this on an individual level, on a community level, or on a big global level as well. So we're going to play around with that a little bit today. And I want to encourage you to think outside the box, to think big about defining and what that is, because often it's something that we can quickly jump to conclusions on, right? It's something that we can quickly say, you know what, like, I know what this is. Of course I know what this is. Here's a pen from my desk. This is something that I clearly know what it is. But maybe we dive into that more, right? Where was that pen produced? What's the impact on the environment of that pen? How do I use it? Why am I using it? What's it used for? All of these different ways of looking at a specific thing can give us this whole wealth of information and data to work with when we get towards solving a problem. Okay, so that's what we're looking at for define. I'm going to hop back briefly. There's actually a great video series, and we're gonna take a quick look at that video right now. So I'm going to hop into Zoom again, and I'm going to just share my screen, but optimize for sound and video. And hopefully, if all goes well, this will lead to some magic. Okay, so let's move this out of the way. All right, please give me an indication, Adam, if you can hear the sound and everything as I start playing this.
Design thinking process is called define. If it was the scientific process, we could call it hypothesize, and some people use that term instead of define. But basically what we're talking about here is problem definition, defining the problem. Now, a lot of times people will come in assuming they know what the problem is. So what you want to do is try and make time and space for that problem to be developed, refined, reframed until you get at what the actual problem is that needs to be solved. So what we do is we take our data from the empathize step and we unpack it, we synthesize what we've learned in that process, we look for insights, and we look for needs. So we put the data that we've collected, and we might find out at this stage that we need more data. And that's why I say it's not linear. It's not necessarily step by step. You might be continuing to collect data as you're defining the problem. Now this is the problem definition stage is probably the most ambiguous and tricky to describe because you're kind of floating in a sea of unknowing. So you have to embrace ambiguity. It is ambiguous. We think we know what the problem is, but we might not. And our user data, our user research might prove that our problem is something entirely different than we thought. So we have to embrace ambiguity, uncertainty, and we have to make the time and the space to let this problem definition brew or cook. There are many methods that we can use in this process. We're going to do data analysis, absolutely upfront. We might do the 5 whys. If we start to identify problems, we would go into layers of why is this happening? Why is this doing this? Why are they reacting this way? Why, as the layers unfold. We will also create personas based on the general population that is going to be, or the targeted audience, general population, targeted audience that is going to be using or buying this product, service, whatever it is that we are creating. We need to redefine the problem as we go. The more we find out about it, the more we can refine and pinpoint exactly what the thing is that we're trying to create or solve. We're going to come up with multiple problem statements. See, I had a problem right there. We're going to come up with multiple problem statements, and we're going to redefine and rewrite our problem statements over again. And one wonderful way that we use a lot is the how might we. So to give a quick example of that, I always love to use international airport security as my analogy or my hypothetical situation. How might we provide a safe, secure, and joyful experience through the airport security? How might we provide a fast, easy, relaxing experience through airport security? How might we provide peace, tranquility, and security through a fast airport experience? So you can see I'm trying on lots of different things to go at this one problem area, and that's the how might we reframing. So there you have it. The defined step in a nutshell.
Okay, so lots in that video. There's a ton in there, and I'm just back in the Zoom now too. If folks are there. Oh, I'll turn my video back on here, of course. There we go. Lots to unpack there, but you can see immediately just in that short video how very quickly our notions of defining something get a little messy, and they get a little unclear and hard to do when we're taking this bigger, more fulsome approach. And so What I'd like everyone to do now, if you were with me on the empathy session yesterday, you may remember that I asked for some sort of problem. It could be a problem that's on an individual level, a community level, or a big global level, a big global problem. And what I'd like you to be able to do now is not only enter your problem, like an example of a problem into the chat. Remember, it could be on any of those levels: personal, individual, community, global, but also add a couple words after to say why you think that's a problem. So for example, if I think that winter is a problem, I'm going to say winter is a problem because it is cold and too long, right? So just something like that. And thankfully, winter is, I think, fingers crossed, over. So let's do that in the chat on the Zoom. I just want to collect, if there's 63 of us on the call now, which is incredible, I would love to collect 63 little problem comments in the chat. Remember, any level, and a couple of words afterward that explain why you think it's a problem. So it can be anything. It can be something you care about. It can be something that you're studying in school, something you've done work in before. It can be anything like that, something that affects you personally if you want to do it on the individual level, something affecting your community, whatever it is that you want. That's totally fine. So let's add that into the chat. All right, I'll type the question into that. What's the problem? What's the problem and why is it a problem? Nice. Okay, so a couple good ones coming in already for sure. COVID, it's affecting everyone. That's definitely wanting a kitten but scared that your boyfriend's mom will say no. That is a problem. Definitely a very specific one to you. And then here's a big one on a big global level. I love it. Rashmeet says global warming because it's affecting the environment in a really bad manner. Absolutely. That's a great example. Thank you. More and more coming in. This is so helpful. Thanks, everyone. Global warming, this pandemic. Yeah, push yourself to think, to try to add to a little bit. What's your why behind this problem? Why is it a problem? Social media increases toxicity to out the process. Okay, yeah. Quality childcare during the pandemic because there are impacts on children, parents, educators. I love this. Yeah, and there's just more keep coming in. Thank you for all this amazing contribution so far. It's such a good way to kind of lay the foundation for this. Really great. Student debt. Yeah, that's a problem. And maybe that one is self-explanatory. Perhaps it's it's a big one. Sports not allowing you to play with teammates. So these are all over the place. High interest rates. I love it. I love this variety in here. And thank you again for adding in and contributing in that way. Everything in the human-centered design process is meant to be collaborative, right? Many heads are better than one. It's that notion. And so what you're doing right now is actually a really key part of the human-centered design thinking process. So thank you for that. Health. Yeah, a great one from Anna saying fast food is cheaper than healthy food. That's a problem. And that's kind of the why behind that problem too. Amazing. Yeah, there's a lot of resources, data, information, generally opportunities not free or available for everyone. Yeah, really interesting one too, right? That is an access issue. How do we solve that? Okay, so thank you for that. We're gonna hop back in the mural just quickly, and don't worry, like those inputs, those things that you mentioned there, they are gonna come back. We're gonna come back to them. Alrighty, so I want to just take a minute, and I'll use the summon feature in Mural for folks that are in there, and you'll notice that again, this human-centered design thinking process, the way it's shown visually, is kind of linear, right? It says step 1, empathize. Step 2, define, ideate, prototype, test. Just like that person said in the video, this is in no way a linear process. It looks kind of like it the way it's laid out, but this isn't a step 1 through 5 sort of thing. In fact, they're encouraging you to do what's called an iterative process. So that means going back in these feedback loops, cycling back to different stages if and when you need to. And that's almost inevitable, right? So if we're talking about defining a problem right now, imagine we've just done a bunch of work around empathizing with the problem. We're empathizing with people and or a problem on some level. So how do we then define it? We're doing some work to define it based on what we learned in the first stage. but maybe it turns out we missed something very significant or something major, right? That we didn't take into account. And so that means we need to go back to that empathy stage, right? So it's kind of like this progressive, amazing video game. This is also a tool. It's a tool that you can use in many different contexts. So again, personal context, your school, your work, your life, whatever it may be, but also in a community context, if you're working with an organization or a public service role or whatever it may be, whatever it is you hope to do down the road, you can use this tool as a way to hopefully do some problem solving that'll lead to really good, but also really sturdy and stable outcomes too. Okay, and so you'll notice too, just down below that outline, when we are doing the defining process, this was referenced in the video too, asking how might we, and that's such an important way to phrase it, to say, how might we, solve this problem is a lot more powerful than saying, this is how we'll solve the problem, or this is what we need to do, right? I think anyone that perhaps some folks on the call, maybe you happen to have kids or nephews or nieces or whomever, the difference between telling a young kid to say, hey, can you clean your room? You need to clean your room up, versus saying, how might we better organize your room? Or how might we better use your room in a way that's more comfy for you? Like, there's a big difference between those two questions, right? When we think of it that way. So that's what we're going to do a little bit of right now too. So I'm going to hop back into the Zoom. And I did this yesterday, and some very gracious and very wonderful people volunteered. And I'm hoping that just one person can volunteer to work through a little activity right now with me. It will require just chatting briefly about that. But if anyone is willing to do that, you can unmute if you want. Or is there one person on our call here that would be open to doing a little 1 minute activity or so, just to demonstrate this define stage to everyone?
I can do it.
Nathan, you're my hero. Thank you. Yes, it's so nice. Better throw a little round of applause reaction. Thanks, Nathan. And so Nathan, I'm going to ask you a question, and then you'll answer it, but then I'll ask some follow-up questions. It's probably a question I'm guessing you get a lot. Maybe lots of folks in the call get it a lot. But I'm curious about, what is your ideal job? What's your ideal thing that you'd like to do in the future for your career?
I want to be like a program facilitator, but have my own place for it.
Okay. Interesting. So my follow-up is, why program facilitation? Why is that something that matters to you?
I was first interested in being a teacher, but I just for some reason, with the grades and all the stuff, and just kind of dealing with them for a whole summer, I think it would just be a little much. And I just kind of think, having my own programs, yes, you would still be with kids, but you can keep it in a sports way or something, which I'm a really big sports fan as well.
Nice. Yeah, I can relate. One of my other hats is I work with youth and do tons of other youth programming with a nonprofit in Aurelia. So that I could totally relate to that. You mentioned too that that you want to be able to have it to be your own program, like you have your own space for it. Why is that an important piece to you, do you think? Why is that something that you value?
I just kind of think it's just running your own business. I think it's just something successful in life. It just kind of gives you more involved, I think. And I just kind of think, before, just kind of having your just joining business, and I just think you always just want to step it up, to be honest. And I think that's just something that I want to do in the future.
Yeah, like a good motivator for sure. And so ultimately, I get all this is adding up to I guess a bigger question. Why is that type of work, especially with, it sounds like with young people, right? Why is that type of work with young people so important to you? Why does that matter for those young people, and why does it matter for you?
Because I think it helps motivate them in their future, that I hope that I help them when they're younger, and that they kind of get involved and hope to do a similar thing in the future.
That's amazing. Yeah. Thanks, Nathan. I could keep going, but I'll pause it there. But definitely to show some love to Nathan for volunteering for that activity. Thanks so much. So what you may have noticed is that I just asked a bunch of follow-up why questions, right? I was asking why this, so well, why that? Why is that the case for you? Why is that the case about the business? Why is that helpful for you? And so really was just demonstrating in that conversation what the 5 whys thing that was mentioned in that video. If we keep asking why, and this includes potentially keeping asking it of ourselves as well, we can really get to some deeper information. If we look at that amazing example from Nathan that he just shared with us, we went from knowing Nathan wants to run programs in a space of his own, which is a great answer, but to knowing so much more, something with so much more depth and so much more substance, right? We got to the meaning of why this actually matters for you and for their future. We got to the way that owning your own business can be empowering, can be motivating, it can be helpful, right? We got to a whole bunch of different key things that we didn't get just in that first why, that first common question. What do you want to do later on? What do you want to do with your career? And I'm sure we've all heard that and continue to hear that many times. So that was awesome, Nathan. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing that. I really appreciated that. Now that we know what that activity is, does anyone else care to volunteer? I just want to open up the space so we could do one more quick one. If anyone else would like to unmute and have a slightly different question, perhaps to ask. Any other volunteers? Anyone else like to do this? All right, I totally understand. Oh, Amanda, are you on board here or no? No, okay. I just saw, that's okay. I just saw your video come on there, and I didn't want to. Again, I want to make sure there's space for.
No, I was just coming back on, but like,
Okay.
no, hi. I'm good.
Hi. No problem. Yeah, I totally understand. Thanks. Yeah, so just looking at that activity, we can see how we can just pull out more depth, pull out more substance when we do that additional work to define a problem. So what that really means is when we're doing that work, there are a lot of options for how that can look. Now, again, this is tricky, right? Because I know some folks were here for the empathy session yesterday, but other folks were not. So I'm just back in the mural here. Yesterday, if you were part of the session, you'll have noticed these empathy maps. They filled up so quickly. Everyone was dumping great information into them and adding different pieces and really building it out in a way that was really interesting, but also running parallel on different levels. We had a problem that was focused on more that personal individual level. We had a problem that was focused more on that community level, and we had a problem that was big and focused on a big global level. Of course, these things interact, but that was how we kind of did it yesterday. And so taking a look back at some of those topics from yesterday, and also just quickly scrolling through the Zoom chat when I asked you not only to say what a problem was, but why you feel it's a problem, tying it back into that activity, I want to suggest to you that those problems you identified earlier in the Zoom chat and the reasons you think they're a problem, those are 100% accurate and valid, right? However, there's probably more to it, right? There's more to the story. Anything, and especially the bigger and more complex a problem gets, the more factors are probably contributing to it, right? And what I mean by that is, if we take a problem like on the charts here, for example, global inequality, that is a problem that has literally thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of different factors. When we're looking at stuff on the personal level, sure, it's maybe a little more straightforward, but there's also a lot of different factors going into our own personal challenges too, right? So where I'm at now in the mural, in step 3, is the design stage tool. Now, you'll notice each of these little sections is called breakout room. We are not going to go into actual breakout rooms for this activity. We're not going to do breakout rooms through Zoom, because yesterday it was really effective to see everyone come into the mural and just help populate these different worksheets, right? So now that we're looking at defining, I want to look at defining these 3 different problems. What's labeled breakout room number 1 here in the mural is prioritizing self-care. That's a problem that came up in your comments earlier as well as yesterday. And in the middle breakout room 2, the need for an addictions facility in a community. That's a problem that came up yesterday, as well as aspects of it in the comments earlier as well. And then the big, messy, global size problem on breakout room number 3, the idea of inequality. So that's a big global problem. So what does that actually mean? And who, and so if I were to zoom in on the actual worksheet, what we're trying to figure out on each of these different examples that we'll work in, who's experiencing the problem, what is the size or scale of the problem. That's kind of what I've been talking about in terms of the different levels that this human-centered design thinking process could be applied on. Why is this problem happening? And why does it matter? Right? So you can see how we've done a little bit about that. We've asked ourselves why a little bit this session so far. But what we're hoping to do is flush out these problems a little bit more. And so what I'd like everyone to do is I'd invite everyone to go ahead and start adding their comments, adding their thoughts to these different sections. So, and then what I also want to do, again, just for accessibility and to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to weigh in and contribute, while folks are working away, doing that in the mural. Or actually, I'll just give a quick example. So for the first problem, for example, prioritizing self-care, who is experiencing this problem? That can be anyone. That could be students, that could be parents, that could be people that are going through a stressful situation, that sort of thing. For the need for an addictions facility in a community, let's say, when we ask, why is this problem happening? Well, there's so many factors. There's no wrong answers here. And I just want to take a minute and reiterate that with this and with so many other parts of the human-centered design thinking process, we are always going for quantity, not quality. There's no one right answer. We are going for quantity. As much good right answers, like they're all right answers, right? Just like all of those comments, the problems and the why behind them that you put into the chat earlier, those were all correct, right? If this was a assignment, you would get 100% on it. That's how we're approaching this thing, because the human-centered design thinking process requires that multiple voices, requires as many voices, many ideas as possible. So to kind of mirror this in Zoom, I see a lot of folks are in there in mural working away. You can work on any of those spaces. So whether it is the one breakout room 1 with prioritizing self-care, second one, need for addictions facilities, or this third one, which is a really tricky one. I'm so curious to see what people put, but the problem of inequality, global. How might we fix inequality? How might we provide an addictions facility for a community? How might we better prioritize self-care, right? That's kind of the how might we phrasing of those problems. Back into the Zoom for those who aren't in the mural, I want to ask the question, and feel free to jump into the chat with this. Let's ask that. How might we better prioritize self-care? Let's start on that individual personal level. And just in the chat here, feel free to weigh in. I'll put the question in here as well. And I forgot the question mark. Sneak that in there. And so I'm curious to hear from folks both on the mural and in the Zoom on that question. How might we better prioritize self-care? Has anyone maybe had personal experience with this over the past year? Has anyone found something that works for them? Has anyone been able to think through that piece? I'd love to hear from folks too. If anyone wants to unmute and does want to weigh in and contribute, I highly, highly encourage that, because this is an important topic, right? That affects everyone in different ways. All right, I'm going to take just another peek in the mural here, and I'll keep an eye on the Zoom chat as well. Interesting. And just an observation that's actually reminds me a little bit of yesterday's session as well. I noticed that first one that's happening at that personal and that individual level, that one's filling up pretty quick. And I think what we might be able to take from that is that sometimes the problems, the challenges we're trying to solve and work towards, when it's happening in that personal individual space, we're a little more close to that. We're a little more connected to that and perhaps can relate to it better. That being said, you'll notice for sure as your different goals, careers, that sort of thing, as that progresses, you'll certainly be able to relate as well to like community needs and even some of these global needs as well. Oh, I'm seeing so much, even that global section, a lot of folks are rising to that challenge and adding their own thoughts on defining the problem of global inequality. That is impressive. That is very amazing to see. Amazing, thanks. Looks like Multi added some stuff to the chat on the self-care problem in Zoom here. So being easy on yourself, rewarding yourself for little things, enjoying alone time. That sounds like a dream. All of those things sound perfect. Thank you for that contribution. Jen talked about meditation helping. That is something I can't relate to it, but I want to be able to relate to it. I want to get better at that piece, and being able to have that time to intentionally wind down. Kamal says, dedicating at least 15 minutes from the day about positive things, about you acknowledging that I'm doing the best you can. Absolutely. Yeah, taking that time, acknowledging your own work. And that actually, Kamal's comment reminds me, remember all of the starting point. We're not starting with just defining a problem. We did a bunch of work, or we will do work on empathy. And that includes empathy for ourselves, right? As part of this process and in this process, how do we cultivate that? Because not only is it better and perhaps more healthy and enjoyable for ourselves, we actually get to better solutions. We get to solutions that are more sustainable, that are longer term, that are more solidified, right? Making boundaries is important. Oh, so many good things are coming in here. Thanks for the folks that are weighing in. I know lots of folks are in the mural, lots of folks are in the Zoom. It's just great to have this information in both spots. Stay away from negativity. Yeah, that's what a great, simple, like straightforward way to put it. I love that. Enjoying the small things, making time for yourself during the day. Totally. This is all great advice, and I hope, and I'm sure that we can all relate to it in different ways. I imagine between these suggestions that are in here. Okay, I'm going to jump just back into the mural here and take a quick look on this same problem. We're having tons of great input. Who's experiencing the problem that we're talking about now? Yeah, parents, youth, workers, single parents, people living alone, international students. Absolutely. What a challenging year for students in general, but yeah, absolutely international students. Anyone with busy schedules. You're 100% correct. That's all helpful. What is the scope of the problem? We're seeing it's getting bigger. Yeah, the problem of how do we prioritize self-care, that problem might actually be slowly growing, right? So which is a great way to work on it, to solve it, right? A big problem impacts so many people. 100% correct. That's so good. Why is this problem happening, right? This is a big question, which is slightly different than the next question. But yeah, some people, everything from the economy to not enough time to putting other people's needs before our own. People are overworked, prioritizing other things in life instead of making themselves a priority. Like, these are all great. And even in our answers here, I just want to make the observation that even in our answers here in the mural, we're seeing answers that are on these different levels too, right? Like the economy, this is a big thing. The economy can cause self-care challenges, but sometimes it's about how we're prioritizing ourselves or not as well. So there's some parallels here between the approach we're taking and the answers that are coming in. And then the last question, why does this matter? So that's different than saying, why is this happening? But then why does it matter? That's a biggie, right? It goes hand in hand with mental health and well-being. That's 100% correct. Again, all of these are great. Stress, suffering, emotional health, all of this stuff is so key. Okay, amazing. And now just to, of course, we're rushing through these a little bit because we do only have an hour, but imagine we were working on a problem either on our own or with a group, and we spent half a day really diving into this stuff. Imagine what we come out with, like, and how many sheets of paper, how many worksheets we have filled up. Consider that too, I guess, when you're thinking of how are we going to actually use this as a tool? How is this actually helpful, perhaps in my life, in my work, in my school, whatever it may be? All right. How might we fill the need for an addictions facility in a community? And there's some great answers in here as well. I want to put it back over to the chat as well in Zoom, just so that folks have that opportunity. Oh, sorry, one last thing before we move on to this. Maggie has such a really good, insightful point in the chat, saying, I never feel worse after spending time on myself. I feel like I'm more present and positive towards other humans when I take the time to look after me. What a great insight. Can't let that go by. That's such a good point, right? Because we only have as much to give as we can give to ourselves, right? All right, so the question for the Zoom chat, based on this next worksheet that's kind of in breakout room 2 here, is how might we fill the need for an addictions facility in a community? Again, there's no wrong answer here. Just think of any part of this question. I'm just adding it to the chat here. And I have not mastered the ability of talking and typing at the same time yet, but there it is. Let's consider that on this community level now, right? There's a lot of people involved in this particular problem that we're looking at, that we're trying to define, how might we do that? What's an aspect of that that we might need to solve? And so I know tons of great stuff in the mural here, but I also want to have Zoom as that platform for folks to be able to think through that. How might we question, to be able to add to it? How might we fill a need for an addictions facility in a community? And I'm just going to take a quicker look in the mural here. Let's see. So yeah, anyone that's suffering, experiencing addiction, of course, those are people that would absolutely be impacted by this this challenge. Yeah, big issue. It impacts many. Yeah, people that are loved ones. So yeah, of course, it's not just someone that has an addictions challenge; it's the people that are connected to them. And then this one, really quickly growing size of answers. And why is this problem happening? There are talking about access, generational, PTSD, stress, underlying issues, peer pressure. Yeah, these are all, again, all correct. And we can take a quick look and zoom out almost on these sheets as we see them fill up, and just consider for a moment how much more information, and even if we want to get really kind of scientific about it, how much more data we have now when we look at these sheets than we did even 10 minutes ago, right? When we were just thinking kind of generally about addiction. On this topic too, a couple great comments in the chat. Jen reaching out to the government for funding. Of course, yeah, funding is always a big blinking light when it comes to this topic. I think that's a really great insight. Raising awareness, deconstructing reasoning behind addictions, teaching people about addiction, and debunking bias towards people who suffer from addiction. Yeah, Shannon, I don't know if I've ever seen a more concise and accurate summary of this social issue, right? Of the social issue of addictions. That is covering both the awareness to the actions of it, to the reactions to it. That's really insightful. Yeah, advocating for the issue, accepting the addiction, and yeah, another shout out from Jen on Shannon's answer. That's really, really well done. All of these are, though, again, we're in that space where this is all correct. We're building our case. We're building our collection of information that we can then use to make really great decisions and have really good insights on our problem when we try to get to that definition. Counseling, yeah, of course. Yeah, that's one piece that hasn't been mentioned yet. Dara, that's a great insight on it. Nathan says, it would help others that have a problem and show them the positive side of it. Of course, there's this ripple effect, right? Because actually, I really love that point, Nathan, because when we're working at problems on this community level, part of that is there's usually more people involved, more stakeholders, more players kind of around the table, more voices around the table. And so by default, we do see this ripple effect go out into the community as part of this type of work. That's incredible. Yeah, thank you. Okay, I know I don't want to glaze over anything, but this last one is really important. And it's on that big, messy scale. They're all messy in their own way, but how might we solve global inequality? So this is in the third little worksheet that we were looking at in the mural. I'm going to dive in there because I know some folks had already been adding a ton of great stuff. But yeah, we are now on that third worksheet. I'll use the summon feature there in case that's helpful. So who's experiencing the problem of global inequality? What a huge question, right? Because there are literally many, many different people and groups of people, marginalized or vulnerable people across the globe that are suffering from inequality in some shape or another, right? So yeah, thinking on this big level can be challenging. But there's some really great input already here in the mural. Absolutely. So yeah, minority groups and someone's identified obviously the racialized aspect, sexual orientation, gendered aspect, culture, immigrants, absolutely. Usually those are lower class or a class-based approach. There's so many lenses through which we can view it, and folks have already identified that. The scope. Inequality affects everyone in some way globally. And that is what an accurate answer. Even the People that are most well off are impacted by inequality in some ways, but in terms of negative impact, that can be so many other folks. Kamal says progressive income tax as a possible way to solve global inequality. Yeah, there's lots of talk about that now, right? How do we have more significant taxes on both individuals, but also corporations that are wealthy and perhaps do not pay tax, or pay very little. Interesting. What else do we have in here in the mural? Okay. Oh yeah. So this question: why is the problem happening, and then why does it matter? Those are so important on this one. But people have added, yeah, ignorance, prejudice, racism. Of course, these are all contributing factors to inequality. I think, like, I'm just gonna quickly add in here, like, just greed. Yeah, so that's another factor. Why does this problem matter? I'm so curious to see what folks put here. The world will never know peace as long as inequality exists. What a great quote. Absolutely. Yeah, it is the root of so many of our challenges. People will feel left alone and might lead to mental health challenges. Yeah, that's another aspect of why this might be a problem. Incredible. And so I know we are working with 3 different examples here, and thank you again for all of the contributions. It's incredible to see these fill up so quickly. Oh, there's another one from Jen. Listen to the stories and the history of people experiencing inequality. Amazing. Yeah, what a great possible insight, right? To say, let's listen to the lived experience of people that have lived experience with inequality in some form or another. Let's center that. Let's prioritize that, because that becomes a as good or better source of insight than we could ever get from reading a book, reading an article, that sort of thing. Amazing. So here's another comment. Most of the people in the world live without their basic freedoms and rights, and are therefore not in a position to realize their potential. Imbalanced distribution of human rights and our acceptance of it contributes to sustaining global instability. We need to make authoritarianism irrelevant and help empower civil societies living under authoritarianism. Incredible insight. Like, that's such a concise and really clear way of putting that, right? You're connecting inequality to people's basic freedoms and to authoritarianism and to that imbalance of power, right? Because when we're talking about inequality, what are we talking about rather than an imbalance of power, right? Shannon too, speaking about inequality issues, raising awareness, pushing to progress as a society in order to help inequality, learn to respect each other. Yeah, these are all, yeah, I love it. All these answers are so great because they all have their own piece that's either incredibly concise, that's like really zeroing in on another aspect of this problem. But what you're proving and what you're engaging in right now is this collaborative process of defining problems on these multiple levels. And there, like I said, it's nice to do this in a space where there is actually no wrong answer. These are big problems that have yet to be solved. And so any solution, partial or otherwise, however, whether it's big or small, is part of that process. And so that's kind of, I think, the beauty of the human-centered design thinking process. The next level of this kind of thinking or this thought would be, we've been working on individual, community, and global levels. The next level of this thought would be, how do we connect these levels, right? So for example, what does addiction look like on a community level? But how can we work in that space on a global level as well? Community level, and we're talking about addictions, but how does that look on a personal individual space too? How do we root that in empathy and be able to connect these levels with our solutions and with our work? And so that's where it gets really exciting. And I don't want to mislead anyone. I know these topics in particular are very much based around different social issues, social challenges that affect people in different ways. But think of my example earlier. If the problem was, I don't like winter, I mean, I could go through the process of this and use it for that problem as well. If there's a problem of that's maybe financially related, if there's no matter how big or small, what it may be, just keep in mind that human-centered design thinking is a tool, and just like any tool, a toolbox, and there's all these tools inside. And just like any toolbox, it's meant to be kind of taken with you and applied in different settings and in different ways. So that's a really key takeaway that I want to make sure is hopefully coming across. Speaking of that, I guess, it's a great time to do a little poll in the Zoom chat. So I always love to do this just to see where folks are at in terms of the content. So on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being no, not at all, 5 being yes, yes a lot, I'm curious as to how well the topic of how well the topic of defining a problem has come across to you. Do you feel like you've gained some new resources or new perspectives, or even though it's been a short 1 hour session, have you gained anything that will potentially be helpful in school, in your personal life, in work, whatever it may be, on a scale of 1 to 5? So just drop that in the chat, and that would be really incredible to see. Oh, right, lots of 4s and 5s. I know too, this is like a very public poll, so if someone's secretly thinking this is a 1 for me, that's okay too. I appreciate the impact and the insights that you've been able to share. Amazing. Someone said 5, I have ascended. That is really a nice comment. Thanks so much. Yeah, I hope it's a good perspective, but just keep in mind too that this is set within a broader process, and it's an iterative process. That means it's constantly re-engaging with itself. And so this is just really the second part of the process. Tomorrow at the 4 o'clock session, I'll be talking about ideation. And that's often a very exciting or interesting part of this process. Not only that, or ideation is just like a fancy word for brainstorming, coming up with ideas. We've empathized with a problem, we've defined it now, we've dove into that work. Now let's start generating some ideas to work towards our solution. And yeah, so that's where it gets interesting. And I know for myself, I'm sometimes guilty of just jumping right to that step. Problem comes along, and I'm like, all right, well, this is how we'll fix it. We're slowing it down. We're building some substance to the work that we're doing, and that's the hope anyway. So that's what we'll cover tomorrow in the session on ideation. One last little peek at the mural before we wrap things up, because again, I'm always, both yesterday and today, I'm just so impressed with everyone's mural skills and how good folks are getting at really diving in there, but also B, how insightful all these comments are. So I really just want to say thank you to everyone as a group. Like I said, this process doesn't work without collaboration, without engagement. Thanks to everyone's very great engagement in the chat. Shout out again to Nathan for being the brave volunteer to do that little activity. But yeah, I just want to say, yeah, thanks again to everyone for their participation. And that is it. I think we have lots of other great stuff coming up this week. I want to wrap it up a touch early, just in case anyone wants to hang around and has other questions, wants a little bit more on this topic. I'll make sure to hang around. We can hang around here a little bit, but do not forget to come tomorrow. Yes, thank you, Jen, and yeah, looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. And thanks everyone for, again, all your engagement. There is still a couple hours of sunlight out there. Get outside, enjoy this beautiful early spring we're having. Yeah, but again, thanks so much, everyone. That's really great and so inspiring to hear. Adam, do you want to talk about that thing you just dropped in the chat too?
Yeah, I just actually threw the PDF for the defining worksheet in there. Okay. These resources are available in other places, but this is just a copy I had handy. So if you thought you were inspired by doing that exercise and wanted to use this to define your own problem, the PDF's in the chat there. You can download it and maybe try it out on your own.
Yes, amazing. Thank you. That's what a great additional resource in real time. Yeah. Yeah, but that's great. Thanks so much, everyone. We are officially wrapped up for this session. Feel free to carry on with whatever else you may need to do today, but feel free to also hang out if you do have any additional questions, comments, anything like that. But thanks again for a really great session, and perhaps we'll see you tomorrow. Lots of CRW left. Yeah.
Thanks, Ross.